Hey, what's good, y'all? It's Stinger, and today I'm going to be showing each and every one of you how you can make a heroic glow beat in the style of DC the Don's song SRT off of his newest album, Sacred Heart, which is a banger, might I add. If you haven't listened to it yet and you're a fan of DC, you gotta listen to it. So without any further dilly-dallying, any hoopla, this is the beat that we're going to be going over today. So there are a couple of main things that you're gonna need when making these kind of beats. One, you're gonna need a brass, if not multiple brass sounds. Two, you're gonna need some nostalgic drum sounds from the early 2010s. And three, you're gonna need a ton of cymbals and open hats. So the first thing we're gonna go over here is the melody. Right now, my personal favorite for these kind of beats is Xenology. While the sounds don't sound like real instruments, that's kind of exactly what we want to go for, because like realistic instrument emulators weren't really super prevalent in the early 2010s. So the first thing I pulled up is this Biggie brass from Xenology, and I have it playing a chord progression very similar to SRT. This is in the sense that it plays the same note twice, plays a different note twice, and then plays a different note to act as a passing chord. So the chord progression we're playing here is going from the 4 to the 1 to the 3. And then I just build super basic chords off of those root notes while including some sevenths to give the chord some more depth. So this is what the melody sounds like. Now, I felt like that melody was lacking a little bit of high end, so I threw down this super airy string pad yet again from Xenology, and it's just playing the exact same pattern as the previous melody. Now, the next thing that is absolutely essential is a super uplifting theremin type of lead. If you don't know what a theremin is, it's that instrument where you hold your hand above it and it plays the notes. I don't really know how it works, but you don't even touch the instrument. And I couldn't really find any good theremin VSTs, but it's super easy to get close to a theremin sound with Serum. All you're gonna have to do is make a lead or take a pre-existing lead and route an LFO to the fine tuning. This will create some wobble in the lead, very similar to the sound of a theremin. Now, as a kind of basis for the lead, I like to go off of the top note in the original melody. So as you can see here in our original melody, the top note for these two chords is D sharp. And that is the note that served as a starting point for this lead. Now with leads, you kind of don't want to go too crazy. You want to have a lot of repetition because repetition creates catchy melodies. So with that being said, this is what the lead sounds like. And then for the second half, I just repeat the lead, throw it up an octave, and make a few changes, but we really don't need to go into that. The next thing that's prominent in these kind of beats are tubular bells. While the Yeet phase has kind of modernized the tubular bells, this was a huge staple of that era, so I just threw those in to stay true to the genre. Next, I threw down a second brass. This one is from Venexi's 3K drum kit. And throughout this beat, we'll be using that drum kit a lot. One, because the drum kit is sick. And two, Venexi is one of the producers on SRT. So what better way to get that authentic sound than to use the drum kits from the man himself? And this brass is just playing the bass notes of the original melody. You get the point. The next part of the melody is a counter melody using another brass. Yet again, this is from Xenology, and I have it at a higher octave than the original melody to create some variation in the pitch and inflection of the melody. And you want to play around with sustain notes and spiccato notes. So the sustain notes are these long ones right here, and the spiccato notes are these short ones. And yet again, this melody is toying around with the top notes of the original melody being D sharp and A sharp. So this is what the melody sounds like. And as a kind of call and response method, I have a secondary brass playing after that previous brass. This one has a much shorter attack and is a lot more simple, so this is what it sounds like. So that is everything when it comes to the melody. It's kind of a lot of layers, but they all kind of have their own purpose. So this is what the melody sounds like all together. And if you want to know how I mix my melodies, you can check out the video in the top left where I go over just that. It's easier just to have that video to reference, that way I don't have to go over it every single time I make a tutorial. All right, so next let's go into the drums. For these types of drums, you want to use a lot of nostalgic and classic sounds. So in this beat, I have the spins 808, I have this classic clap, I have this super recognizable cymbal, and I have this chant that sounds like the Chuck E. Cheese ticket machine. And as I mentioned before, for the drum sounds in this beat, I used Phonexi's 3K drum kit along with my Hive stash kit, which you can get for free in the link in the description. So the first thing that I threw down is the 808, and it's just following a super simple pattern going along with the bass notes. And then for the second portion of this 808 pattern, I throw in some octave notes just to create some variation. That way it's not just super boring and bland and having the same thing play over and over again. Next thing you're gonna want is a clap, and I just have it playing a super basic pattern. Now something you could do to make your claps stand out more and be a little bit more present in the mix is to layer them with a snare. And that's exactly what I did here with this snare from Phonexi's kit. Next thing I threw down is a counter snare playing a really basic pattern with this roll at the end. Throwing in some snare rolls is another thing that can tie your beat back to those old Chief Keef beats, because those just go nutty with the snare rolls. Next thing I threw down is this hi-hat pattern from my Quasar MIDI kit. It includes 100 midis and has hi-hat midis and melody midis as well. And the pattern just has a bunch of rolls and counter notes to create some bounce in the beat. Now, as I mentioned before, you're gonna need a lot of open hats and cymbals. And what I like to do with those sounds is I like to match them up with the 808. So for this open hat, I have it hitting at the same time as the first 808 hits. And then I throw down the cymbal that hits at the same time as the next 808 hit. And finally, I just threw down two different chants. Firstly, the Zay chant. And secondly, this other chant that's kind of tucked away in the back of the mix, but it still kind of makes a difference. So with everything all together, this is what the drums are sounding like. So that's gonna pretty much cover how to make some heroic, uplifting glow beats in the style of DC the Dawn's song, SRT. Hopefully you enjoyed the tutorial and learned something new. If you have any questions, please feel free to throw them in the comments down below and I will do my best to answer them. Also check out my Patreon in the link in the description. I post all of my FLPs from my past, present, and future tutorials. So if you want to study certain aspects about the beat without having to come back and reference this video, boom, it's at your fingertips. Also consider subscribing as I post 2 tutorials every single week. One long one and one short one. Other than that, that's gonna be it. Peace.